Hello. Welcome to a series in bilingual education. Bilingual education is controversial and complex. We do, however, have some assumptions that we use in the field to create a positive learning environment for the second language learner. One is called comprehensible input or understandable instruction. Here simply means that we create pedagogy, we create the language, the instruction where children actually learn in their second language. Then we have BICS and CALP. BICS, Bilingual Interpersonal Communication Skills, says that children between 1 and 2 years will become highly proficient in English. Then we have CALP, Cognitive Academic Level Proficiency. Here, the research suggests that children between 4 and 7 years will learn how to participate in an academic environment. We also have what is called the Lau versus Nichols decision of 1974. Here, the Supreme Court of the United States stated that the school has a responsibility to create equal access programs for second language learners. So here we are. We have a BICS, we have CALP, we have comprehensible input, and of course equal access. This evening we will be discussing some of these topics among others. Our moderator is Ms. Joyce Takita, and Ms. Takita has an MBA from the American Graduate School in International Management from Phoenix, Arizona. I hope you enjoy the program, and thank you very much. Ms. Takita.
Thank you, Dr. Simoes. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us for our discussion of issues pertaining to bilingual education. I would like to introduce our panelists. Mr. Carlos Rojas holds a Master of Arts degree in Education from Sacred Heart University. He's currently working at the Homebound Department of the Stanford Board of Education. Ms. Angelica Guevara has a Bachelor of Science degree in Psychology from Southern Connecticut State University. She's currently working in special education at the Norwalk Board of Education. Mr. Joel Castillo has a Bachelor of Science degree in Spanish and is currently a high school Spanish teacher in Stratford, Connecticut. And finally, we have Ms. Viviana Cruz, who has a Bachelor of Arts in English and a Bachelor of Science degree in elementary education. She's currently a bilingual elementary education second grade teacher in Stamford, Connecticut. As you notice, our title is Cultural and Political Issues Affecting Bilingual Education. Let's begin our discussion with the question, what is bilingual education? Mr. Rojas?
Thank you, Ms. Takita. Let's just jump in. Bilingual education is an instructional program designed to teach students with limited English proficiency. Most of the time, the teacher will clarify complex subjects in the children's native language. For the most part, the class should be conducted in English.
I see. Ms. Guevara, do you have another definition?
No, I agree. It's a transition into the mainstream classes, helping the students learn through their native language, and it's used mostly to help the students ease into the classroom and learn a new culture and language while still maintaining their identity.
That's great. Mr. Castillo, anything to add?
Yes, bilingual education is a program that is devised to ensure that it serves the needs of students who are limited English proficient.
Is there anything you care to add to that?
Well, put more simply, bilingual education basically teaches students English by first teaching difficult concepts in the student's native language. At the same time, bilingual education also maintains a positive self-concept among the student by integrating the student's culture while simultaneously teaching American culture.
I see. Ms. Cruz, do you think that we need bilingual education in our school systems?
Yes, I do. I think that it's very important to have bilingual education because these students are coming in to the U.S. not knowing English, and they need an educational model that's going to help them succeed. And without bilingual education, they would just be put into the mainstream without being familiarized with the language. So bilingual education is necessary. It helps students transition into the mainstream, in all areas, not only the social, but also the reading and the writing component, so that they can later be successful in the future.
Well, that's great. Does everybody agree with that?
I do believe the bilingual education is needed. I, however, don't completely agree with the implementation of bilingual education. As Dr. Simoes pointed out, research that could easily be manipulated and obtain predetermined results points out to 4 to 7 years. However, 4 to 7 years, I believe that is a little too much. It works well with children, but unfortunately, we don't choose who immigrate to this country. A lot of the times, we get kids that come here when they're 16 or 17, and almost about to complete their high school diploma, so they only have 1 or 2 years of eligibility. What do we do in those cases? I know some people are going to say, well, there is some research that say that when you're older, it takes a little less time for you to learn. However, these kids come from impoverished countries with a very limited educational background. Myself had some kids in my classes, 16, 17, they didn't know how to read and write. So I'd rather teach them a little English sufficient so they can function in everyday life, rather than start teaching them grammar and all of this stuff associated with bilingual education.
I see. Would you like to add anything, Mr. Castillo?
You know, I know that Mr. Rojas here mentioned that, you know, research can be easily manipulated. On the other hand, you know, I know that research says 4 to 7 years. That doesn't actually, you know, refer to everyone specifically, just like an average range, you know, and it's to achieve academic English, not just social communication.
Oh, I do agree, but I think even at the lower range, 4 years is a little too much. Think about it. 4 years. Let's say. Let me explain myself a little better when I say research can be easily manipulated. I was just reading an interesting article last week that says that people dealing with bilingual education programs usually utilize kids from highly impoverished countries with limited culture and education. So I don't want to point fingers at anyone. I just want to say that 4 to 7 years is excessive, and it doesn't really work for everyone. You're right, it's only a range, but we should limit that range. Kids, the ones that I teach and the ones that I know, when not given definite boundaries, they will take as much time as they like to take.
Ms. Guevara, how do you feel about it?
Well, I'm listening to Mr. Rojas, and I do believe that a lot of things in life can be manipulated. Maybe some research is manipulated, but that doesn't necessarily mean that all research is manipulated. There's a lot of research out there that says we need bilingual education. And as Mr. Simoes mentioned earlier, he spoke about Lau versus Nichols, a decision in 1974, which the courts gave the decision to the schools that it was their responsibility to help the students who come to this country to learn English language learners, to help them and give them the extra support to learn the language. And for the people who, for example, Proposition 227 in Arizona, California, and Arizona 203, they only believe bilingual education should be for 1 year. But at the same time, when that year is up, they choose to give these students extensions until they feel that the students are able to learn enough English to put them in mainstream classes. So why would they go for a proposition which only gives them 1 year if in the long run they're only going to give the kids extensions anyway? And it's still a violation of these children's civil rights according to Lau versus Nichols.
I see.
I'm sorry, sorry to interrupt
So,
you.
it's all
Going
right.
back to Lau versus Nichols, Lau was an Asian student who was a political tool used by the bilingual education movement because he was a good student. But unfortunately, we have come a long way since then, and we talk a lot of bilingual education. But bilingual education is not anymore about Asian or Europeans. To be perfectly honest, it has become about Latinos and sometimes Brazilians. And the problem is not so much with the system, it's with the people running the system. I have been into so many educational systems with so many incompetent teachers, So with these teachers, it won't take them 7 to 8 years. It'll take 20, because a lot of the times the teachers have to learn English themselves first. So we have to, we need reforms in the programs.
I agree with that to some point, but it's still not fair for the children to have to suffer because of the incompetence of some professionals, because it's not all professionals who are incompetent. There's some of us out there who actually want to make a difference and want to help these kids and want to help children in America succeed and give us a better future.
And if I may add, it's not that the majority of the teachers teaching bilingual education are incompetent. It's more of the system as a whole. Is the system providing these teachers with the resources that they need to effectively teach these students? Teachers can go into the classroom with all the training in the world that they need, but if they don't have the resources to implement that training, then that bilingual model is going to fail those students. So it's a variety of factors that plays into the success of the bilingual student.
I see. Well, that brings us to our next question. Currently in Connecticut, there's a 30-month limit on the time that English second language learners can spend learning English. Do you think that that time is sufficient, Mr. Castillo?
I don't believe that children should be squeezed into a specific time limit. I think we all agree when they say that everybody learns at a different rate or through a different method of instruction. I don't believe that students should be penalized. In other words, if their time is up, then just move them on, because we have to keep moving. I know that the time frame does set aside does create a sense of urgency to the student and to the parents. To the teacher, to achieve that goal, which is to learn or teach English to the student. But again, we don't learn at the same rate. We don't learn through the same method of instruction. So, time isn't, I don't think, is an issue here. I think it's the quality of instruction that we should pay close attention to, like Ms. Viviana Cruz said.
I see. So you also agree that 30 months should not be set in stone?
Right, I agree. I think that in 30 months, you can usually observe a bilingual student implementing the English social language skills. But so regardless if they can speak well, you still have to take a look at the whole thing in terms of the reading and the writing. And in 30 months, the speech may be developed, but the reading and the writing is still lagging. So I think that if we reject reliable research that says it takes between 4 to 7 years, and as my experiences as a teacher, I'm seeing these students, and I'm seeing that some of them are succeeding within those 30 months. I'm sorry, I think I said that.
Right.
But some of them are not, and they need more time. So we're putting constraints and limits on these kids, and it's affecting them in the long run.
Well, the limits need to be put, because the educational system in Connecticut, whether you are a bilingual student or not, once you reach a certain age, the state is not responsible for your education anymore. So if we retain those kids in those programs for 7 years or 5 years or however long they need, by the time they get to high school, some of them might be a little too old to obtain their high school diploma. So they will obtain their academic skills necessary. However, they will have to go someplace else and get their diploma.
So
unless you have been diagnosed with learning disabilities by age 19, you have to have your diploma. Otherwise, the school is not responsible to educate you anymore.
But I think that retaining the student and keeping the student in a bilingual model so that you can scaffold their learning are two totally different things. I'm not referring to retention. I'm referring to a program that's going to help these students succeed, because if they're not ready to go on to the next level, then they need necessary supports in place.
Right. You mentioned retention. I believe that bilingual education is involved with the dropout rate for high school students too. Does it improve it, or does it make it worse if they have bilingual education? Ms. Guevara?
Well, I don't think that it makes it worse. I think it actually helps a lot of the students who are in the bilingual education program, because if we did not have bilingual education programs, a lot of these students who do come to this country and are old enough to drop out go to a class where, if they don't have bilingual education, they don't have any comprehension of what the teacher's teaching them. So why even bother being there? They
Yeah.
take a test and they fail it. Their self-esteem goes way down. Why even be in school? I mean, that's what they say. That's what they would think. So to make their content comprehensible by helping them through their native language, it helps them to actually stay in school, graduate, and have a successful life.
Oh, great.
Unfortunately, the system cannot afford to have them there indefinitely. She mentioned California before. California has had a severe problem with pachucos. Pachucos are people that have been here for several generations. Their kids still don't know English well or Spanish well. So they have developed their own way of communicating, and they go through the school system and they continue to fail. However, they fall under the bilingual education system. So they fail, they cost the system a lot of money, however, the system is still responsible for them. So there has to be a limit, otherwise these people will never complete their education.
I see.
And they don't have to.
What has your experience been?
You know, everyone mentions, you know, is bilingual education accountable for dropout rates? I think that if we're going to start pointing fingers at bilingual education, then so should general education, public education. They should be held just as accountable as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we supposedly here work as a team, bilingual education and, you know, public education. We're supposed to work together, excuse me, to, you know, help these students achieve success, you know, academically. And for some reason, I feel, you know, in cases like this, you know, when we start to point the finger at bilingual education, it just, to me, creates a wall between the two programs. It's just general education, and, you know, our goal is student success, and I think that's what we're missing. You know, to me, it seems like you have, for example, two people working to achieve one certain goal, and, you know, that's when programs or anything gets accomplished, you know, efficiently. When you have one person working towards that goal and the other one's just sitting around, basically waiting for the other one just to kind of you know, make a mistake, and the other one's just sitting there and saying, oh, you know, there you go, you know, it's your fault. We can't have that. You know,
No.
this is at the cost of student success.
I see.
Going back to dropout rates, I do believe that bilingual students are not they don't hold the greatest dropout rate of all minorities in the country. I believe African Americans do. And if I recall correctly, they were born and raised here and they speak the language. So who do we blame? I mean, it's like we keep these kids in bilingual education programs, and we ourselves, we're setting ourselves apart from them. I'd say ourselves because I myself was a bilingual education student. And it's just, I don't think it's a bilingual education program. The reason why these kids are dropping out is just poverty, lack of services. I think it's responsible.
I also,
more than
if I may interject, expanding on what Angelica said, if these students aren't experiencing daily success in school, then they're going to be most likely for failure in the future, which would mean dropping out. Right. So it's a variety of factors. It's poverty, it's the models, whether they're being implemented correctly or incorrectly, and how the student is actually feeling in that classroom. Is that student given opportunities to succeed?
And culture is important also,
culture
right?
is very important.
So, do you have any more thoughts on this subject? Not right now.
So
Okay.
the problem with these kids, they don't have positive role models. A lot of the kids that I worked with in the past, they will look at me and laugh at the kind of money I actually make as a teacher. And they use their local drug dealer as a role model and say, you know, that guy make what you make in a month, in a day. And you see, how do you compete against that? And at that age, they're very impressionable. And they don't really care about education. They want a quick buck. That's what they want.
And I don't think we should generalize students in that negative sense. I think there are those students out there. They have supportive families. They have role models. Their parents are their role models. They see their parents working hard, and they want to get further in life. And there are very negative people around them as well, if they're in poverty and people around them. But ultimately, these students want to succeed. But it's the system, it's the government. You know, is bilingual education being supported correctly? Are effective effective tools being used and are teachers being trained in the area. So it's a bunch of things that
I
come
see.
into play.
Well,
One of
thank
the
you
things
very
that-
much.
I apologize for interjecting again, but one of the problems that I see is there is no accountability. The problem is, yeah, these kids, everybody makes excuses for them. Everybody says, well, it's the system failing them, it's the teachers failing them. But a lot of the times, if they have to make an effort, and if they make enough of an effort,
Right.
they will succeed.
Another hot topic comes to mind. Is it the responsibility of the public education system to help second language learners maintain their culture and language? Or is it someone else's responsibility? What's your opinion, please?
I do believe that culture should be preserved at home. It's not the responsibility of the school system. The school system is already overburdened with too many responsibilities. Again, it costs taxpayers a great deal of money. Besides, there are far more opportunities to reinforce culture in the community than in school. A lot of school systems, a lot of bilingual education classrooms have 19, 20 kids, and 15 different cultures are represented there. I know a lot of people believe that just because they speak Spanish or because they are Latinos, they can easily tap into this kids' culture. However, Latin America is 19 different countries. We're talking about Chile. Do you know enough about how the CIA promoted a strike in Chile to depose Allende? Or do you know enough about Torrijos in Panama? Or do you know enough about Batista in Colombia? There are many different things there. And a lot of the times, trying to promote culture, if you don't know enough, you may step into somebody's toes. And rather than promoting somebody's culture, you may offend somebody's sensitivities. So I will be very careful before I suggest that a school is responsible for promoting culture.
I see. Ms. Guevara, how do you feel?
Well, I think the school's responsibility is to help the children learn English and help them achieve academic success. I do not believe it's their responsibility to help these students maintain their language and culture only because there are too many schools, there are too many students, there are too many cultures. This is a country where we have, I don't know how many different cultures and languages. So if you put, like Mr. Rojas said, 19 children in one classroom and they're all from a different culture, you could spend a whole year just going on with every single one of their culture. So I do not believe it's the responsibility. However, some teachers do like to incorporate different cultures into their social studies classes and other events they like to do, and I do agree with that. I think that children have a lot of fun with that, and they enjoy it, and they can learn, and they can talk about it. And as for who is responsible, I think that the community in which these children live in, and mostly the parents. Their parents can maybe take them to theater, have them read literature about their country, have them read books in their native language, have them go to theaters. They can go to celebration and events. Their religious beliefs, they can do, I think it's mostly the parents' responsibility. There's after-school programs that their parents can put them in. There's, they can hire private tutors, and they can go to weekend schools to help them maintain their language and culture.
I noticed, Ms. Cruz, that you mentioned earlier that you do include cultural things in your classes. How do you feel about the subject?
Well, I basically feel that culture is inevitable. It's there in the classroom with the students that you're working with. And sometimes it gets brought up, and you can't help but address that issue or whatever it is in the classroom. I don't think that it should be taught exclusively, but I think that if it can be integrated into the curriculum, then by all means. I mean, and Carlos has a point where if culture is going to be taught, it needs to be taught correctly. But if you're going to try to integrate culture into the curriculum, that's what the parents are for. That's where the parents come in, and the teacher-parent interaction takes place. And parents love to be part of the classroom and to feel part of that classroom community.
Do you agree?
I'm going to have to disagree with this whole side here. I understand that there are many cultures in America, and like you said, and that is why we as teachers have to teach students and assist them in embracing and also being aware of their own cultural backgrounds and heritages as well as those of their peers. It shouldn't be held, the parents shouldn't be the ones that should be held completely responsible to teach their children about culture. I feel there should be an equal balance there between the school and the parents. The responsibility should be held between both. Within the classroom, like Ms. Cruz said, teachers should integrate the culture into the curriculum. Excuse me. But in a way that way students can learn about their own as well as their peers. Parents, there's too many times that in my classroom that I've seen parents have just leave the complete responsibility to the school, and that's when I get students in my classroom that don't know anything about their culture at all. They don't know anything about their cultural background, their heritage, and then that's when they start to learn at the high school level. And that's what we want to avoid.
But by its own definition, culture is everything we do. I mean, if you're talking about their background, their historical background is one thing, but culture, they're creating the new culture. There is their new culture in America, and we are, as the school system, is responsible for that. We're teaching culture. We're teaching about the Egyptians. We're teaching about the Greeks. We're teaching a lot of different culture. As long as we can integrate it and put it into context, it's a great thing. But if we're gonna go out of our ways, because these kids, we're supposed to provide them with a round education. And I think the school has a curriculum that works well. One of the few things that the curriculum in itself looks good. How it's implemented, it's a whole different story.
See, I'm sorry, I just need to jump in real quick. It was another point that I forgot to mention, but there are workshops for teachers that would help teachers know how to do that. You understand? So it is implemented as long as the teachers are trained to do so. I remember you mentioned something else too. It's the tax dollars are what's important here. It's an issue, but to me it's something like, for example, when we talk about cancer, and we want to raise money for this issue, and it's a very serious issue that we want to take a look at. We want to raise money, and we do everything we can in our power to raise money for cancer to solve this issue. But here we have bilingual education. This is our student success. We're looking at. They're our future. If we don't start raising money for this, to help these students succeed, then. And we just back away from it. I mean, we are like cancer sometimes. I'm not going to categorize myself in that. But people who are strong advocates to just eliminate bilingual education program and find faults and just take it away, that to me, we should stop putting the blame on bilingual education programs. Try, use all our effort into shutting it down. Let's put our effort together and let's start raising some money to solve this issue instead.
Right. And I also want to add, we shouldn't sway away from the second objective of bilingual education. The first objective is to help these students learn academic English as well as social English so that they can get into the mainstream. But the second objective is also for them to maintain a positive self-concept. And if we're denying them their right to know about culture and to have it integrated in the curriculum, then we're not fulfilling the objectives of bilingual education. And in terms of funding, I mean, if we're going to have to spend money to have these students succeed in the future, then it's well worth the investment.
Indeed, it's a well worth investment. However, I'm not saying that there is money, and there is a lot of money. Every board of education across the country, I mean, not every town across the country, the bulk of their money, the bulk of their budget goes to education, and that budget is divided equally among the different programs. So it's not there is a lack of funding. There is funding there, but it's not. They don't just have to fund bilingual education. There is also special ed programs. It's a lot of stuff. I just said money is limited, and we have to do what we can do with what we have. Mr. Castillo is right. Yeah, we get a lot of money for cancer, but it's not the same. You've seen somebody dying of cancer, or seen somebody who is just learning English. It's two different things.
Oh, okay, so learning English isn't that important then?
I think
I'm
not saying that it's not important. I just say when you put them in, I don't think they belong together in an analogy. I think dying of cancer, I mean, learning English.
I think it does go together. Just in the comparison, I mean, we think about a person that has cancer, and we need to help them out. you know, to find a cure for this, to end it. Then if we put our effort towards that, it's just as if you have a student that doesn't know English and we're trying to help them out, but wait, we don't have the money, we don't have the funds to help you out anymore, I'm sorry. You know, it shouldn't be that way. We should have, put our effort to trying to raise as much money as possible to continue helping out this person, same way as we're helping out cancer patients.
Cancer is terminal. There is no cure for cancer. Bilingual education, there are solutions. There are different programs that work. We all agree with competent teaching, kids will learn. It may take them 7 years, it may take them 10 years, but they will learn. Cancer, there is no solution.
Well,
They die.
basically, what I think the main point is here is that funding should not be allocated to certain areas and then left out of other areas. So I think the point that that Mr. Castillo was trying to make is that when a certain educational area is favored, then that area usually gets funding somehow. But when there's an issue that's controversial, it's harder for that funding to be allocated to that area. And it all comes down to how much support is that educational area receiving. Is it well favored by people of authority to be able to issue those funds to that model?
But funding shouldn't just come from the government. If we are so gung-ho about funding of bilingual education, we are the largest minority group in the country. So maybe we should ourselves start thinking about helping a little bit.
You think
Maybe
languages
we should
group together?
come together, donate a little bit of our money, create a group, create a foundation for bilingual education students, just like cancer people do. They create the foundations because they are sufferers.
And that
So-
goes into teamwork. That's what needed. That's what's needed to be able to create these funds and to have the proper support and supports in place is teamwork. And when there's people on one side who don't believe in a program and other people on the other side who don't believe in a program, then that teamwork is put on hold,
But
and
that's
then
the-
the funds are harder to come by.
But that's the issue with everything else. That's what I'm saying. As long as you find all the people that agree with you, those that agree with you will willingly give money for that cause. And a lot of people, I don't give money for cancer research either. I don't know if any of us does.
Well, I
So
think that's
then-
what Mr. Castillo's trying to say. We all need to make
Right.
a difference, and we all need to
Excellent.
bring some money
That's what I
together.
s- yeah,
It's
we
not
have to-
just one person or one group. That's what he's trying to say. We all need to make a difference.
I misunderstood. I thought the government, they were saying that the government is responsible for providing the money. And
Well,
and
we
I was
pay
the one 'cause-
taxes,
and
and
I was the
I'm
one-
sure our tax money goes into education just
Exactly.
like it goes into everything else.
Exactly. But we personally should take a little money out of our pockets and start putting our money where, I mean,
And I think
Where
as
mouth is
educators, we do put plenty of money, we do take plenty of money out of our pockets to get those classrooms ready and to get those resources that we are not provided with by the system. We do use our own money for a variety of things in the classroom. So what specifically are you referring to?
but you as an educator of bilingual education, but it's not just you. People who teach regular education do the same thing.
Right,
Because-
so we
because
are investing our money
exactly
into
what I'm
this
saying is
program because we believe in it.
Everybody's getting the same money. Why do we expect special treatment just because we are bilingual education teachers? What I'm saying is nobody receives special treatment. So let's deal with what we have. If that's not enough, let's create our own resources. Because
Well-
everybody has problems. It's not
Well,
just bilingual
there
education
are a
problems.
variety of opinions and a lot of controversy related to bilingual education, but we all agree that we have a common goal of helping all children to succeed, and including bilingual or minority students. And what we learned today is that we need more cooperation and teamwork to succeed with this. The availability of bilingual education is very important because it affects a student's chances of graduating and succeeding in American society. It's been tied to civil rights, and it's used as a method to promote diversity, and so it has widespread consequences on our country. At this time, we would like to open our discussion up to questions and comments from the audience. Are there any questions? Ma'am?
Yes, I have a question. My name is Wang Jing. I'm from China, and my husband is American. We have a son who is 4 years old. He speaks Chinese and English. next year he will go to the public school. Both my husband and I hope to raise my child being bilingual. So my question is, what are your suggestions for me as parents to do to maintain our child bilingual? Thank you.
Oftentimes I see parents who come into the U.S. and they want their child to become Americanized and only be into that American culture and not teach the child the native language, and then the child grows up and doesn't know that beautiful language that their parents share. Secondly, in order to maintain the native language among your child, I just think that if you continue to speak to your child in Chinese, then your child will continue to learn more about the language. And if your husband continues to speak to the child in English, then the child will continue to learn English, and that way the child will grow up knowing both languages simultaneously. And in terms of culture, if you expose your child to different things pertaining to your culture and the American culture, then that child is going to be very well-rounded, well-versed in both languages and both cultures.
I see. Are there any other questions?
Hi, my name is Carla Fontes, and my question is directed to anyone on the panel. I know that there have been some models developed to help ELL students. I was interested in knowing what are some of the models and which model is most effective. Thank you.
I'd like to answer that question. Indeed, there are several models that will help the child learn English. They go from a model where the teacher will hardly ever speak English to a model that Connecticut uses that is a transitional model where the kid will be taught in English about 20% of the time the first year. The second year it'll be 50-50, 50 English, 50 realistically Spanish, because that's the majority of the students that we get in our bilingual programs. But the third year he will be taking most of his classes in English, 80% English, 20% is Spanish. There are also programs such as submersion, where the kid hardly ever speaks his own language. The classes are taught in English mostly. Some complex thoughts are clarified in English. To me, it's not an issue of what program works or what program doesn't work, because if you really look at these programs carefully, they all have one thing in common. Those that are actually successful are successful because of the skill, the ability of the teacher, as well as their commitment. So if your kid happens to be with a committed teacher, it doesn't really matter what program he would take.
I agree with Mr. Rojas that a committed teacher will help the student out more. However, the program that he spoke about, submersion, which is the sink or swim program, is the least effective. So I would think that you wouldn't want to go that way. Another program we have is English as a Second Language, and it's a classroom in which the teacher helps the students develop their English proficiency, and it's just in that one classroom. The rest of the classes are mainstream English classes. There's also the English as a Second Language pull-out program, which has the same effect as the English as a Second Language classroom. However, this program is on a one-on-one basis with the student. A teacher or a paraprofessional pulls out the child for 45 minutes a day and only teaches them the English language, and then the rest of the classes are in mainstream.
See, we have time for one more question. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Diana Larquente, and this is directed to anyone in the panel. As a current educator, it seems to me that there seems to be some controversies or inconsistencies, I should say, among bilingual education and special education placements. And because of these inconsistencies, it seems that it's causing controversies between schools and districts. Could anyone comment on that, please?
I'll comment on that. Legal requirements tend to be very difficult for teachers, school districts, school officials. It's just a very complex and very controversial issue, because there's legal requirements are just so difficult to understand sometimes, especially by the teachers. because of their lack of preparation at times. A while ago, there were cases where too many students were being misdiagnosed, and after that, there were many legal battles where teachers and school districts were being sued because of that, for students being misdiagnosed as a result of that. Now what we have, because school districts are very wary about misdiagnosing students, now we're not diagnosing certain students that do need the special services. And now we go from one extreme now down to the other. I think what we need is to, prepare our teachers, school officials, districts in this area a little bit more, and spend a little bit more time and focusing on that.
At this time, I would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Simoes, and our audience and viewers for joining us.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Ms. Tequila.
Thank you.